Welcome to another Enspiral podcast. Today we're here with Silvia. Hello. Good
Hi,
to see
that's
you.
me.
And we're here to talk about Twitter, which I know you're a big fan of, and you've been using it for a while. And I was always quite impressed with how you're playing with it. So maybe you can introduce a little bit, like, how do you think of Twitter? What is it for you? How do you use it?
Um, that's a very interesting question. So Twitter is like a playground and also my office in a way, and also my journal. So it's a mix of all of those because it's where I make a lot of my friends. It's where I think out loud and make sense of things. And it's also where I find my clients and collaborators. So yeah, I would say that's like the broader picture of it.
I really like that you thought about it straight away in almost in this context of spatial organization. Like it's like one building and another space and another space. Would you like to add a little bit more on that? Like I'm kind of curious, how do you visually represent those different spaces existing in this digital stream of thoughts that people are posting?
What do you mean by how I visually represent?
How do you see it for yourself? You mentioned that it's your office and it's your playground, which made me think that, okay, this is like a very visual, specific space type of space. But then when I'm actually interacting with Twitter, the kind of format that it's presented is just like lots of ideas coming in those short messages of text. So I'm curious, how do you find those, how do you connect those ideas together?
Yeah, great question. So one thing that I want to say is that for me, when I think about Twitter, I don't just think about the app or the website. I think about it as like that's the starting point. But then I actually cultivate those relationships outside of it, whether that's in private messages or calls or meeting people in real life or gatherings with like all those people or a lot of those people, but just like in the flesh. So Twitter is really just the starting point, like to plant seeds for other things to happen and more interactions to happen afterwards. So yeah, let's see. So it's a playground because I like a lot of it is like replying to people, and that feels like play. That's how I make friends, how things start, how you see if you vibe with each other. That's how I, practice being, I don't know, being funny and just being fun. And like sometimes there's games that people play, just invitations to reply to your post. Like yesterday I posted this thing where my trickster enchantress arc has begun because this is like a character I want to embody more. And I just asked people to reply and I give them a spell from my orb, this thing that I was, holding. And it's like, yeah, let's see what comes out. And then people reply and how they reply is already like giving away some of the ways in which they like to play. And then I reply back and I make something for them, and then it's fun and there's a connection being made there. So for me, Twitter, in terms of a playground, is a lot about just replying to each other and just playing. And then it's my office because this one is the trickiest one, I think, because I still have a lot of hang-ups around asking people for money and being like, hey, I sell this service online and you can pay me money for it. And I am an artist, and the services I sell are connected to my art, and my art is also how I express myself, and it's also how I play with people many times. So there's like kind of a blurry line, and I'm still trying to figure it out. But basically, Twitter is where I find my clients, but my clients are also my friends and they're also my collaborators. So it's not like there's a clear boundary between all of them. It's like I post stuff, and sometimes that stuff is like, hey, if you want to work with me, here's something I do that is cool and you can pay me for it. So I think in that in that area is also about how I want to show myself to the world, and that connects to the playground in the sense that I can play different characters, and I just want to choose the ones that are like most authentic and that feel the most fun, and that are how I want to show myself in the world. And then there's the, I don't know, personal development slash journaling slash spiritual practice side of it, which is I use Twitter a lot, and a lot of people that I know on Twitter and that are like in this part of Twitter where I am, that use it to think out loud and just like put ideas out there and just discuss with people and contribute to conversations, and just practice things like, I don't know, being vulnerable in public and experiment with how far you want to go with that, or where are the limits to the things you think about and your ideas, and just like having things reflected back at you and ask questions and be exposed to different ideas and be able to like build them together with other people. I don't know. I'm realizing that I'm not sure if I really answered your question in terms of like how this looks like as in a visual space, but this is what came up.
Thank you for sharing. And I really love how you're framing it. It seems to me, from what I'm hearing, is that it's you know, you're showing up as your authentic self. Okay, sometimes wearing a certain mask or embodying a certain character, whether because you want to practice, you know, being funny, or just playing around with your art or engaging in certain conversations. But it's also a professional space. Somehow you're merging this sides of life that often maybe tend to be separate, you know, like I'm professional now, I'm wearing my serious professional hat and a suit, and you know, I show up to my office, but then I play with my friends and we're doing fun stuff, just, you know, for laughters and also for becoming friends, right? But somehow it seems like those two spaces are coming together for you in Twitter, with this added component of possibility of thinking in public and building your ideas in public and contributing to other people's thought processes, and just creating this massive super brain of ideas bouncing off each other. It sounds really beautiful.
Yeah, I really like it. And yeah, that makes me think about this idea of like being authentic versus playing characters or wearing masks. And this is something that's been very relevant for me, and I'm still experimenting with it. And it feels like I can never show my full self online because it's just such a limited medium. It's like there's text and there's images and there's video, sure, but it's mostly text, and I am not there all the time, and I cannot see the fullness of expression of people when they post something in 280 characters. So you're always selecting what it is that you're going to show. So what do you want to show? What parts of yourself do you want to show? And how does that look like for other people? And how do you want it to look like for other people? And there's a lot of people on Twitter who are really, really good at this, just like having alts and basically having different characters and then tweeting from there. And for me, I feel like because I have a real name account, it's like, it's Silvia, it's me. It's not like my alt. I'm and then on top of that, it also being like my professional account, I'm still playing with all of that and trying to juggle it all under one name. And I also want to play with different characters. I also want to experiment being different people. But I like the authenticity of just being myself and just showing my face. And yeah, so I'm not sure where I'm trying to get with this, but it like something around that has been brewing for me, and it's been present.
Do you have some kind of either a practice or a more intentional way of kind of changing deliberately between those different alternative selves or characters that you want to embody as you're showing yourself and showing those different parts, since you have just one account, right? Or at least from what I understand,
Yeah.
for context, outs, which we're referring to, are just alternative accounts that are not necessarily obviously connected to that person, right? So it might be just like, oh, it's this account, but we don't know who this person actually is.
Yeah. I do that not only on Twitter. I'm trying to do that also in my life in general, experimenting. I think naming things is very helpful, like choosing archetypes that I want to embody and just being like, hey, I want to be the trickster now. How can I do that? I want more of that energy in my life. And yeah, I showed you my trickster ears that I made. They're fox ears, and I've been wearing them whenever I want to switch into that. So that's really helpful, because it's like there's a clear boundary from me being just whatever I am when I'm not thinking about it, and me being this specific character that embodies traits of the trickster archetype. So yeah, that's the way I do it. And just writing about it is very helpful, even if just for myself. Like, what are the characters I want to embody? What are the energies I want to play with? What are the archetypes I want to experiment with bringing to life and combining? Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. I'm really curious about the journey that you had personally with Twitter. I mean, I've been following you for quite a while, so I know that there were quite a few different iterations and stages. So I'm curious, like, where did you start and how it all evolved for you to reach the place where you are now, when you're mixing all these different personas and selves?
Yeah. So I don't really remember where I started. I've had a Twitter account since like 2017 or something like that, but it was nothing like it is nowadays. Back then, I was just like doing other stuff online, and I remember that this is when I was trying to be a sort of solopreneur and have different projects online. And I was like, okay, I guess I need to have an online presence and have like social media accounts, and then like cross post things that I do. So it was just like this very rigid, like one-sided posting on Twitter, and I was pretty much not there. And then I just left it for a while and never logged in, and then I came back to it, I don't know, like 3 years ago, something like that. Yeah, at the end of 2020, I believe. And again, I don't remember exactly how it all unfolded, but Rich Bartlett, he's my Twitter dad. Hi, Rich, if you're watching this. I knew Rich, and then I saw that he was on Twitter, and I saw that there was something happening there. Like, oh, he seems to be having fun and like following really cool people and having really interesting interactions. And I just started following a bunch of the people that Rich was following and interacting with. And that's how I found myself in this part of Twitter, which is a whole thing in itself to define. And that's how I started making friends. And from then, Twitter became a place where like it went from being just like a platform where you post stuff into the void and read horrible news and share stuff that's viral, and became a place where I start following real people that are my friends and have one-on-one interactions, and it's a mutual thing. And I don't follow like a lot of huge accounts that have like millions of followers. I basically follow my friends and their friends and people. I don't have like a direct relationship with all of them, but like most of them I've interacted with and conversed with, and that just changes the whole experience. and this is connected to what I was saying before, that like my clients are my collaborators, and they're also my audience, and they're also my friends, which is a very interesting mix. And then after a while on this whole journey, I was like, I still want to do cool things, and I still want to earn money online, and I want to make art. So that's when I started posting my art online on Twitter. And I feel like I said this so many times already in so many places and podcasts and stuff, but there's this thing that Visa had about do 100 thing challenge, and I just decided to do that with my drawings, which is just like, if you really want to become good at a thing, just do it, do 100 of it, and just see what happens. Do it for the journey. And then I started doing that, and I started posting my drawings, and then people really liked them, and eventually people started asking me to do commissions for them or to do portraits for them, and that evolved into me being a full-time artist, doing cool stuff on Twitter, and also having lots of friends there that I made on the way. Yeah, that's sort of my journey in a very small nutshell.
Well, it seems so fascinating for me to see those, like how you reverse this pattern that I'm also familiar with as a, this kind of entrepreneurial advice, like, hey, publish your thing and then engage with big accounts, hoping that one day they will retweet or like promote the thing that you did. And it's just this very, it's really like interacting with the void, while it seemed like you really transformed it completely. And it's not about necessarily finding clients, it's more about making friends, having fun, showing yourself. And actually from that, having fun together, interacting together, deepening relationships, also clients come through that, but maybe more motivated by the fact that you're just a cool person to hang out with in this online space, and they like this pieces of yourself that you're choosing to share in forms of tweets and images. And I love hearing how this 100 thing journey changed, seems like, your professional career.
Yeah.
So I've wanted to start experimenting, since we define Enspiral a little bit vague as this group of people helping each other do more meaningful work in the world. So I wonder, what is your meaningful work? What is meaningful for you?
I noticed that when you ask this question, I feel a thing in my stomach, like, oh, I don't know. I think lately it's making things that make me come alive and feel like, hell yeah, I love doing this, and where I see that it does the same thing for people I do it for. So I like to see the direct impact that my work has on people, as in opposed to like working for a big corporation where you have like a programming job where you tweak this little thing on this app that is just like 1,000th of the final product, and you don't really see the results, and you just kind of disconnected from the money you earn. Like, for me, is directly correlated to the value the other person feels. So I really like that's what feels meaningful for me, having like a very hands-on connection with what I do. Feeling like there's some magic in it. I've been very into magic recently, and I want to do things that feel magical, that create value that goes beyond what is measurable and palpable. Like, I want to create artifacts with my art that people are going to treasure, and that they're going to look at them and they're going to provoke a shift inside of them. and they're going to touch them, and they will help them access parts of themselves that they want to access, and they're going to help them, I don't know, be in touch with things that are important to them, or achieve their goals, or make something come alive inside of them. This is what feels meaningful in my work, specifically at this point in time. So it might change, and it might be different for other people, and it might be different for me next week or next month. But this is what feels like important work for me right now.
Thank you for sharing. And I totally resonate with this shifting nature of purpose and meaning work. And yeah, depends what is the stage of your life. You might find that your sense of meaning, what meaningful work is, also is evolving along as you are evolving as a person. So thank you so much for sharing. Another question that is coming up for me, kind of circling back to Twitter specifically, is, so you mentioned that Rich was your Twitter dad, which I assume is like this kind of guiding figure introducing you to the space. So I wonder if you would be now a Twitter mom, what would be your kind of, starting suggestions for a person that, maybe came from this more, Twitter as marketing tool, professional side of things, or just, hey, there is this social media I want to play around, and what you're sharing, like this embodying your authentic selves and making friends and playing and having a good time, but also finding collaborators and making meaningful connections with people that then you can create something. How would you go about it? Like, where do you start? What are some suggestions there?
So I guess if I was someone's Twitter mom, I'm assuming that this is a person that I would know and would have some things in common with. So first of all, I would tell them to look at the accounts I follow on Twitter, because they're all great. And just go look at them and follow some of them, and just start replying to their stuff and interacting. And just like as if you go, to a playground and want to play with other kids, just do that, but on Twitter, and reply in a kind way that either encourages or adds something positive, and start making friends, and also show yourself, show who you are, what you're thinking about, what's important to you, and eventually start messaging your friends and start having calls with your friends, and maybe start meeting your friends in real life when you go to where they are, or check out some gatherings, ask them when you go to a city, like who's there, and then form friendships from there, and let those friendships turn into collaborations, and let it shape you, and let it happen organically, and have fun in the process, and be kind. That's my approach.
So based on that, what you shared, I'm my curiosity is going into this. How do you see the difference between like the nature of Twitter as this super open space, right? Like anyone can interact with anyone. So how does that change this process of building friendships compared to places like Enspiral, which is, a closed network in the sense that, it's, of course, new people are coming and some people are leaving, but there is a certain specific group, there is a very clear boundary around it, and you know that you have these rhythms and gatherings and online calls and stuff that is more, like there is a clear boundary around it, while Twitter seems kind of limitless and fully open. What's the difference there for you?
Good question. What's coming up is, for me, Twitter is the place where you find people that you want to start Enspirals with. It's like Enspiral is a small dating pool for friends and collaborators, and Twitter is like a bigger one for Enspirals or other projects like Enspiral. And the fact that it's infinitely open, it just increases the possibilities for the amount of reach you can have, and that can be helpful for you depending on what you're trying to do. It feels like in Enspiral I already, and like my relationships in Enspiral already come with like a baseline amount of trust, whereas on Twitter I don't, you know, I if someone just replies to me, I've never seen this person before, I'm like, okay, cool, fun, let's interact, but it doesn't mean that I'm, you know, gonna give you a lot of my time or my attention, whereas that happens in Enspiral because there's a closed sort of boundary, and it feels more, yeah, I'm trying to think of like a metaphor or an analogy to point at the difference, but nothing's really coming up. Yeah, I think the most important thing is find people on Twitter that you might want to do something like Enspiral with, or that you might want to bring to Enspiral or other places like Enspiral. I have a lot of sort of crews and congregations that came from Twitter and that I started with people that I met on Twitter, and there's people in Enspiral that I met from Twitter, and then they entered Enspiral because they knew me or Rich and like found their way in. So yeah, I would say that's the main difference.
I'm curious, you mentioned like, yeah, like in places like Enspiral, you have this baseline of trust, while on Twitter, yeah, it's, if you don't know the person yet, it's just kind of this new interaction. It doesn't have this baseline. I'm curious, did you experience, or what are kind of like disadvantages of it, or some risks or dark sides? I mean, the things that are coming up for me is like, how much vulnerable do I actually want to be, and do I want to expose myself in a space that is kind of infinitely accessible to anyone, when this layer of trust doesn't necessarily exist in the kind of open public space? Yeah, I'm curious how you relate to that.
So I think some things about it are good because you also have more contrast of people with totally different experiences and coming from different places and backgrounds, and that's really interesting. But yeah, like negative sides you're asking about. I think like parasocial relationships is a big thing. So like people, now that I have a certain amount of followers, and it's not even that much compared to a lot of people, but like I have met a lot of people in real life that they already knew me on Twitter, but I didn't know of them, and they were like, oh yeah, you're Silvia, of course I know this thing you were talking about, and I know that you're doing this project right now. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are. And so far I haven't had bad experiences with that, but I know of people that have had bad experiences with those kind of relationships. Like this person, because they follow you and they see your work, they assume that there is a certain amount of intimacy that isn't really there. It's like, oh, if I know you, then you surely know me as well, so I can address you in a certain way. And it never happened to me, but it's just like a different kind of, like, I wouldn't be as vulnerable on Twitter as I am with, you know, in private conversations with people from Enspiral. You know, of course, it's just about knowing how to, where's the line, like what sort of interactions you want to have in each of those places. I think both of them are good for their specific purposes.
So I guess what I'm getting from it for myself is basically being very clear about like, yeah, having this awareness of certain lines and operating within that, but also then, yeah, why not make friends? And I assume that you made some friends that are like your close relationships that
Yeah.
came purely from Twitter.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And it's okay to fail sometimes also. Like I've posted stuff in the past, but then I was like, oh shit, that was way too vulnerable, and I don't feel good about it. But then it's okay, I wouldn't know if I wouldn't have tried.
Maybe that's something. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was thinking to ask you about that before, which is what is your kind of relationship with perfectionism? And like, oh, I'm posting something and I'm still showing up, okay, as a person and as this playful guy, but also there's this professional side of me, and I want to come across as as someone, whatever is the mask or the persona that I want to embody. How do you even face this struggle? Like, oh, I don't know how to phrase this so it comes across coherently, or just because of the format limitation that there's a specific limited amount of characters. It's like, how do I say this? And how would you what's your suggestion, and what's your relationship to navigate this perfectionism tweeting?
Good question. So for me, I think what's the thing that feels most real is there are things sometimes that I want to post about, but I don't, because I know that a lot of the people who follow me have met me in real life, and I wouldn't like some of them, I wouldn't want them to see that. I don't know. But also I would like to have input from people I don't know into like, hey, what is this? Like I have questions about this, and I would like answers and feedback, and I could use the amount of followers I have to like generate data that would be helpful for me. But also I don't want to be the person who asks that or who says that, or it just feels too vulnerable. Like I don't want to disclose certain things about my private life in public. And I guess this is what having alts is good for, but I just never went into it deep enough that I had, like, I've experimented with having alts, but like I've never developed it enough that I had enough people that I was connected to or had enough followers that it could really lead to something that felt helpful for me, because I just always came back to being Silvia. Let me go back to your question. What is my recommendation? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't really feel a lot of pressure to be like professional, because I don't have a boss, and I can do whatever I want. I I would say that my main block usually is like, oh, there's a certain risk because some of these people have seen me and they know my identity, so I don't want to go like completely unhinged, but it's fine. Like I can play within those boundaries, and I know that there are ways to explore that also outside of it if I would want to. It's just not a priority for me right now.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess my kind of final question that is coming up, like what's your next evolution of Twitter life, as you see your friendships grow, but also your account growing in number of followers, so like people that you maybe don't know of interact with you, or they know of your work. What do you see as the kind of the foreseeable future for you on your Twitter life?
Good question again. I'm not sure. I think I'm seeing it less and less as just Twitter. and like more the relationships themselves, also because, you know, there's a lot of things changing on Twitter recently, and I'm like, I don't know, is this gonna be my main platform forever? Probably not. But I do want to keep those relationships that I've built. And yeah, and I think just keep using Twitter as a playground and as a place to think out loud, and as a place to find people who are my clients and collaborators, and seeing where that goes. I think I want to be more playful with all of those areas. And yeah, the trickster is alive in me, so I want to explore that.
With your jester ears, your trickster ears.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Really enjoy this conversation. I feel like, okay, I learned more about Twitter. I'm gonna apply these techniques to my own parts that are also playing there.
Yeah. It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed it too. Thank you for your great questions.